My parents handed their inheritance to my sister, but she wasted it on a deadbeat husband. Now, they expect me to support them in return for a portion. Can you imagine your own parents treating you like a backup plan, only turning to you when their golden child squanders everything they were given? Because that's my life story, and it's a twisted tale of favoritism, betrayal, and a whole lot of unspoken resentment. Growing up, it was painfully clear that Emily, my younger sister, was the undisputed favorite. She was their little princess, adored and shielded from any wrong. Seriously, their entire world revolved around her. Every tiny thing she did, from a school accomplishment to just smiling, was met with praise and absolute pride. It was constant. And then there was me, the older sister. If I needed something, it came only after Emily's needs were met. My issues? Rarely addressed. I often felt like an afterthought, a shadow in their brightly lit world. Here's the thing, though. Emily and I never had bad blood. I actually liked her. Despite everything, I never resented her. I know in these situations, siblings often develop jealousy, but she was just my little sister. I never saw her as an enemy. Of course, there were moments I wished things were different. I wished I wasn't always pushed to the sidelines, my needs and feelings perpetually second. But I also knew Emily wasn't to blame. She didn't choose to be the favorite. And I certainly didn't choose to be overlooked. Let me give you some real-life examples of how deep this favoritism ran. Every year for her birthday, we went to Disneyland. A full day of pure magic, excitement, memories. Emily always looked forward to it, and my parents went all out. My birthday? A dinner at a local restaurant. That's it. The difference was stark. Her birthday was a grand event. Mine felt like a chore. When it came to extracurriculars, Emily was always the priority. My parents claimed they only had enough money for one child's activities, so it was ballet for Emily, not tennis for me. The frustrating part? I was good at tennis. I loved it, I had potential, but they just didn't see it as important. Their advice? Focus on your studies, not just a game. In reality, they just wouldn't invest in me. And grades? Emily was never an outstanding student, maybe a B at best. But every report card she brought home, my parents would gush, congratulate her, express pride, even give her gifts. My story? Totally different. I could get first place, straight A's, and there was no recognition, no excitement, no rewards. My parents just expected high grades from me, not because they cared about my achievements, but because I needed to set a good example for Emily. If I fell short, I was chastised, lectured, made to feel like a failure. It didn't matter how hard I worked. My accomplishments were never celebrated like hers. After high school, when I went to university, my parents rarely offered financial support. I was expected to take out student loans, figure it out myself. You're self-sufficient, responsible, they'd say. But when it was Emily's turn, they paid for everything, without hesitation. Their reasoning? She's too young to bear the stress of a loan. It felt so unbelievably unfair. Like I didn't deserve the same help just because I'd learned to care for myself. It was frustrating, but I'd just come to accept it. This was our family dynamic. Emily got a brand new car the moment she turned 19. They just handed her the keys, no questions asked. She didn't have to ask, beg, or prove she needed it. Meanwhile, when I needed a car for a part-time job in college, I had to repeatedly ask my mom before she finally let me borrow her old, beat-up vehicle. It wasn't perfect, but I was grateful for anything. The problem was it broke down constantly. I'd be stranded on the side of the road, desperately trying to get it to restart. When I asked for help with repairs, they refused. My father would tell me, if you want to drive, figure it out yourself. So, when it inevitably died, I took the bus. Freezing cold, pouring rain, oppressive heat, I walked my own path. My parents didn't seem to care how hard it was for me. Then, when my maternal elderly relatives passed away, my mother inherited a significant sum. I didn't expect any of it, but I certainly wasn't prepared for what happened next. Instead of doing something meaningful for the family, she used it to go on a special trip, just for herself and Emily. I wasn't even told. I only found out when Emily started posting photos on social media. Fancy dinners, luxurious resorts. Asked her where she was. Left me on read. Seeing those posts hurt in ways I can't even describe. It wasn't just about the trip. It was the realization that they hadn't even considered inviting me. When I finally confronted my mother, she made lame excuses. Last-minute plans, didn't know if you'd be available. But then, she admitted something that hit me like a ton of bricks. She said she'd always felt more connected to Emily because Emily was more like her. And she didn't expect me to mind as much. I burst into tears. My own mother.
Saying that.
I realized then that no matter how hard I tried, I'd always be on the outside. My parents were absolutely overjoyed when Emily graduated from college. They treated it like she'd done something unprecedented, a monumental achievement. My mom, so proud, gave Emily half of my grandparents' inheritance. No conditions. Spend it on whatever you want, she told her. Travel, a new car, a business, just enjoying life. It was a massive gift, designed to give Emily a secure financial foundation. Meanwhile, I got nothing. I didn't expect half, but being completely overlooked again was a total slap in the face. I had worked so hard, supported myself through college, asked for so little. But my mother thought I didn't deserve any help. When I dared to question why Emily got so much and I got so little, my parents just dismissed me. As the oldest, you're expected to be independent, strong, self-sufficient, not rely on handouts. My dad even tried to spin it as a compliment, saying he believed in me, that I didn't need their help because I was capable. But Emily? She was always viewed as the one who needed more assistance, the one who needed to be protected and provided for. It was infuriating, disheartening. While I was expected to figure everything out on my own, Emily got everything on a silver platter. Despite everything, I've tried not to harbor resentment towards my parents, and I've also tried not to resent Emily. As much as I adore her, I can't ignore the fact that she has never truly stood up for me. She never acknowledged how unfair things were. Never told our parents they were wrong. Part of me wishes she had spoken up, told them I deserved better. But she never did. She just accepted their generosity without question, never considering how I felt when I was left behind. And that, honestly, has been the hardest part for me to overcome. Anyway, because my parents had always just given Emily everything, conflicts between them inevitably started to emerge. Despite all that money, Emily chose to move back home after college. She claimed she wanted to save more, but it looked a lot more like she preferred to rely on our parents than be independent. At first, my parents didn't seem to mind. They'd always coddled her, so having her back probably felt comforting. But gradually, it became too much. Emily wasn't just living with them. She relied completely on them for everything. She'd insist my dad buy expensive groceries, regardless of cost or budget. She never contributed, never offered to help with bills, and acted like their money was hers to spend. She expected my mom to continue caring for her like a child, refusing to do her own laundry, doing no housework, never cooking or cleaning. She treated their house like her personal hotel. The same parents who'd given her everything without hesitation were now finally facing the consequences of their own actions. And they were complaining. They'd spent years ensuring she never had to struggle, so having her live there rent-free and relying on them felt natural. But as they got older, things changed. They didn't have the same energy. They started expecting Emily to step up, even with minor responsibilities. That's when the fight started. Emily would get upset whenever they asked her to help with groceries, pay for something, or even do simple chores. She thought it was unfair to expect anything from her when all she wanted to do was relax and play video games. My sister no longer felt compelled to look for work after getting that inheritance. So she just lounged around doing nothing. But that wasn't the only issue. Emily also developed a habit of staying out late, coming home at all hours. My parents would wait up, worried, but she didn't care. She was living her life on her own terms, completely disregarding how it affected them. My parents, who'd always made excuses for her, were now dealing with the monster they'd created. They'd spent years giving her everything, shielding her from consequences, and now that they expected her to act like an adult, She flat out refused. Emily's situation deteriorated even further when she met someone online and fell in love.
Tom.
He was the epitome of a deadbeat. No job, no ambition, no plans. He only seemed interested in getting Emily to send him money. And she did. It didn't matter that everyone else could see he was taking advantage of her. My parents and I tried repeatedly to warn her, but she wouldn't listen. Every time we mentioned it, she'd get defensive, even furious, insisting we didn't understand. She didn't see her actions as foolish. She saw it as true love. Emily was always willing to accommodate Tom's requests, sending him money for rent, food, new clothes, video games. It didn't matter that she was living off my parents' money, her inheritance. Whatever Tom wanted, she found a way to give him. My parents, who'd spoiled their daughter rotten, now had to watch another person take advantage of her. Emily refused to hear anything negative about him. She believed helping him showed her loyalty. She refused to accept reality. Then, 3 months ago, Emily abruptly decided to elope with Tom. It was completely unexpected. No hints, no discussions, nothing. One day she was living at home, the next she was gone. She didn't even tell our parents until afterward. We only found out when she video called us from her honeymoon. She proudly announced that she and her new husband, Tom, planned to travel the world and fund their grand adventure using her inheritance, or what was left of it. This was the same money my parents had assumed she'd use for something responsible, like a house or a secure future. Instead, she was blowing it all on her deadbeat husband. As you can imagine, my parents were furious. Mom was particularly upset. She thought she knew her daughter better than anyone. For years, they had favored her, given her everything she wanted. And now, in their eyes, she had abandoned them all for a man she barely knew. Things haven't been the same since. My parents, who once went above and beyond for Emily, have finally realized the consequences of their actions. They've drastically reduced communication with her. And now that my sister is no longer their favorite, I've noticed a complete shift in how my parents treat me. It's like they've suddenly checked in. They want to go out to lunch. They're trying to include me in activities they never cared about before. My mother, who used to barely acknowledge my presence unless she needed something, now calls just to talk. She's suddenly calling me whenever she wants to go shopping. For years, I'd watched her and Emily go, always excluded. Now, she acts like including me is normal, like we've always had this kind of relationship. My father calls frequently too, checking on my work, my health, asking if I need anything. Family dinners have changed as well. Before, they'd make plans without considering my availability. I was an afterthought, invited if it was convenient, but never a priority.
But now?
They plan dinners around my schedule. They confirm my attendance, contact me before making plans, and seem genuinely excited about my presence. It's strange, almost unsettling. Even socially, things have shifted. They expect me to accompany them to weddings or family gatherings. It'll be great to have you there, they say, as if my presence has always been their primary concern. Meanwhile, when Emily was around, they never asked if I wanted to leave. It's like they've decided to make me a replacement for my sister. Part of me, a deep-down part, wants to embrace this change, to finally get the attention and care I wished for as a child. But another part of me is deeply skeptical. Was this simply a matter of convenience, now that Emily wasn't available to be their ideal daughter? And unlike Emily, they actually expect me to work for them. For example, when my father became ill, my mother couldn't help much because of a bad back. Suddenly, they expected me to step in and care for him, no questions asked. When he was in the hospital, they pushed me to visit him as frequently as possible, almost as if it was my responsibility to be there every single day. They expected me to drop everything and focus on them, something they never asked Emily to do when she was their golden child. Then, over Christmas, my parents sat me down for what felt like a very serious discussion. They told me they had decided to give me a portion of the inheritance my mother had received, the money they'd previously decided not to give me. Keep in mind, my mother had already given half to my sister. So, she was sharing some of what was left with me. My mother said she and my father thought they should have given me the money right away. They hoped I would invest it wisely or buy a new car because, according to them, my 4-year-old car had served its purpose. I was completely caught off guard. My parents had never been this generous to me. For years, Emily got expensive gifts and financial assistance, while I was told to be self-sufficient. I was understandably suspicious. I looked at them and asked, "Why are you suddenly being so nice to me?" That's when they revealed the truth. My parents sighed and admitted they'd learned their lesson after what happened with Emily. My father went on to say they could never trust her again because she had willingly spent all her money to run off with a deadbeat. Instead of giving her more money, which she would undoubtedly waste, they chose to give it to me because they trusted I would use it responsibly. My mom looked at me and actually said that, in exchange for their generosity, all they wanted was for me to be their temporary favorite child. She said it so casually, like it was a perfectly normal thing to say. According to her, this meant I should listen to them, be there for them, and look after them now that they were older and had no one else to turn to. Dad chimed in, saying he'd always known I was the more responsible one, and he had high hopes for me that I wouldn't let them down like Emily had. I just sat there, staring at them, trying to process what I had just heard. Hearing them say this confirmed what I had suspected. This wasn't love. This wasn't appreciation. This felt like they were attempting to bribe me into taking care of them. They'd lost Emily, their golden child. So now they wanted me not only to replace her but also to cater to their needs. Their motivation for giving me money wasn't to make amends for how they'd treated me. It wasn't because they regretted ignoring me all these years. No. They needed something from me right now. They offered me these gifts with strings attached. They expected something in return, my obedience, my presence, my care. They didn't appreciate me as a person. It was about creating a safety net for themselves now that Emily was no longer present. At that moment, I realized something painful. My parents never really changed. They didn't suddenly wake up and recognize my worth. They simply shifted their preferences because Emily had let them down. And now I was just their backup plan. Now, I could have refused the money. I certainly could have protested. I could have called them out on their hypocrisy, pointed out how they'd ignored me for years, expressed my true feelings. But I didn't, because there was no point. It wasn't as if they'd suddenly realize their error and apologize. It was unlikely they would finally admit how unfair they had been. Instead, I decided to simply accept what they were offering. My parents had never given me financial assistance before. I had always been the independent one, the one who had to struggle and work for everything. Emily received handouts. My sister had been spoiled with expensive gifts, free college tuition, a brand new car at 19, and half of my elderly relatives' inheritance. So, what did she do with it? She took off and spent everything on herself and her husband. Meanwhile, I worked hard for everything I had with no assistance from my parents. She had received more than enough from my parents over the years. So, if they finally wanted to give me something, who was I to refuse? So, I kept my mouth shut and accepted the money. However, since then, my parents' expectations of me have only grown. Every day, they seem to feel more entitled to my time and energy. My mother constantly relies on me to drive her around, even though she's perfectly capable of driving herself. If I refuse, she reminds me, "After all I've given you, you can't even do this simple thing for me?" She acts like the money she gave me was some kind of lifelong contract, binding me to her every whim. And my father is no different. He now expects me to handle everything for him. Paying bills, ordering things online, filling out paperwork, making appointments, fixing things around the house. If he needs something, he calls me first, as if I'm his personal assistant rather than his child. It's frustrating because while I expected them to occasionally call for help, I never expected them to put the entire burden on my shoulders. Emily was never asked to be responsible for anything. But with me, it's as if they assume I owe them my time and effort simply because they finally decided to acknowledge me. And I despise it. In addition to managing my own life and work, I now have to constantly think about my parents and their endless demands, which is exhausting, overwhelming, and extremely unfair. I never asked for this money, but now it feels like they only gave it to me so they could use it as leverage. To make matters worse, my mother fell down the stairs yesterday. She had to be taken to the hospital, and the doctors ordered her to be on bed rest for at least 3 weeks. My father then called and asked me to move in with them, so I could care for Mom 24/7. I was completely taken aback. I told him that while I could visit her every evening, I couldn't just drop everything and move into care for her full-time. My parents were upset and accused me of being too self-centered. Dad argued that they had given me money specifically for this purpose, so skipping work wasn't a big deal. But I stood firm, telling him he couldn't just dictate my life, and I refused to become their full-time caregiver. So many people asked why I didn't just refuse the money, or why I'm still interacting with my parents after everything they put me through. The truth is, I don't want to regret not helping them. As much as I resent how they treated me growing up, they are still my parents. A part of me fears that if I completely cut them off, I'll look back and feel guilty for not being there when they needed me. They're getting older. And while I know they're only coming to me now because Emily let them down, I can't help but feel some responsibility. Maybe it's the years of being forced into the mature and responsible role. Maybe it's just my conscience. But I don't want to be the person who walks away and later wonders, what if I had done more? That being said, I also don't want to be taken advantage of. Since my parents started treating me as their new favorite, their expectations have been overwhelming. I'm trying to strike a balance. I don't want to completely cut them out, but I also don't want them to guilt-trip me into being at their beck and call. If they truly regret how they treated me in the past, they should show it through their actions, not by suddenly expecting me to step in and replace Emily. I hadn't fully decided how to handle everything, but in the end, I hired a caretaker for my mother, and I'm covering the entire cost myself. My father isn't happy about this. He believes no outsider can care for Mom like a family member, and he thinks I'm selfish. But I can't always keep them happy, and honestly, this is the best option for everyone. In case you're wondering, my sister is fine. She and her husband are still traveling and enjoying life, and she video calls us every now and then to check in. However, my parents no longer tolerate her. They're still angry about how she betrayed them by running off and using the money they gave her to fund her own adventures, instead of, I suppose, staying home and relying on them forever. It's strange to see how quickly their love for her has turned into resentment. Emily could do no wrong in their eyes for years, and now they act like she's the worst person in the world. It's not that she's suddenly turned into a bad person. She's just doing what she's always done, putting herself first. The only difference is that it no longer benefits them. It's been a few weeks since the caretaker started, and I finally sat down and had an open conversation with my parents. I told them everything. How I felt growing up, how I saw them favor Emily over me again and again, and how it made me feel inadequate, like I was never enough for them. I told them that with Emily out of the picture, it felt like they were just using me as a replacement rather than genuinely caring about me. I also made it clear that just because they had suddenly decided to give me money did not mean I owed them anything. I told them how exhausting it was to be treated like their personal assistant. I was not their servant, and I refused to be guilt-tripped into taking care of them when they had spent years pushing me aside. At first, they argued, saying things like, "We didn't think you would mind," and "We just thought you were capable enough to handle everything," as if that somehow made up for their behavior. But I stood firm. And in the end, after all these years, this is the first time I've truly expressed my feelings to them, and they now realize that if they want me in their lives, they must treat me with the respect I deserve. It's been 5 months since my last update, and I followed some of your advice. I went to therapy, which has been one of the best things I've ever done for myself. It's helped me process a lot of the emotions I've buried over the years, and I'm gradually learning to set boundaries with my parents without feeling guilty. Surprisingly, my parents have become more understanding in recent months. They no longer expect me to be at their beck and call. We still spend time together, but it feels normal now, like a genuine parent-child relationship rather than an obligation. It's not perfect, but it's much, much better than before. Meanwhile, as I expected, Emily has been trying to make her way back. Turns out all her money is gone, and her husband still refuses to work. She recently approached me for help, but I declined. I knew if I gave in once, she'd keep coming back, and I'm not about to start funding her lifestyle. She also went to my parents, hoping they'd take her back, but they stood firm and told her she was on her own this time. Emily and her husband are currently living in his parents' basement, and I hope she will eventually figure things out and learn to care for herself. It's been a long, complicated road, but I'm finally finding my voice and setting my own path. What would you have done in my place, especially when faced with that backup plan offer? I'd love to hear your thoughts.